You owe no explanations to anyone. Perhaps you haven't yet realized, but there is an invisible, oppressive weight that many carry without even noticing. The weight of needing to justify all the time, of trying to explain choices, of seeking approval, of offering arguments for decisions that, in truth, belong only to yourself. It is a silent exhaustion that wears, drains, and weakens. Because explanation rarely brings understanding and almost never offers the relief that is sought. To live seeking to be understood is to live chained to a court that will never be fair, that will never be satisfied, that will never give the verdict of full acceptance. The pursuit of validation is infinite and insatiable, and those who feed it remain forever prisoners of others' expectations and opinions. The Stoic invitation is different. It is not arrogance, not indifference, not disdain. It is freedom, existential autonomy, silent sovereignty. To leave when it is necessary without guilt, without justification, without the need to be understood, as one who deeply respects their own destiny and the silence of their own conscience. Epictetus, master of self-mastery, understood and taught that nothing outside of us can determine our inner freedom, neither acceptance nor criticism, neither understanding nor rejection. Only we and the relationship we have with what we choose and with who we are. Seneca, with his sharp wisdom, reinforced that true greatness is not in the ability to convince or to please, but in the ability to act according to one's own reason, not according to applause or to criticism, but according to the silent clarity of one who knows what must be done. This video does not propose an aggressive rupture, but an invitation to freedom, to maturity, to silent respect for oneself. To leave when it is necessary, to go without noise, without announcement, without defense, without explanation, simply to leave. As one who honors their own path, as one who chooses their own silence, as one who understands that often what most liberates is not to be understood, but simply to go. There is a silent but corrosive need to be understood, to explain every decision, to justify every step, to ensure that the other approves, endorses, accepts. As if the legitimacy of choices depended not on inner conviction, but on external validation. As if the strength of a path were measured by the number of people who understand or accept it. Epictetus, with the serenity of one who knew that true freedom is born within, not without, taught, "Do not seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do." Because the need to be understood arises from attachment to approval, to the desire that the other will legitimize what you already know to be legitimate. The breaking of this expectation is painful, but liberating. True strength is not in being understood, but in moving forward even when no one understands, even when all doubt, criticize, judge, condemn. Maturity does not shout, does not beg, does not ask for understanding. It simply moves on in silence, because it knows that those who need to be understood are still prisoners of others' opinions. When making a decision, there is a question that can illuminate or reveal the prison. Am I doing this from conviction or to be understood? And if it is to be understood, perhaps it is still not a decision truly your own. Like the river that flows its course silently, even if the stones never understand its direction. So too, those who choose the freedom of not being understood find a maturity that does not depend on applause, nor on understanding, but only on their own clarity. And they move on, in peace, in silence. Simply, they move. To explain may seem like a gesture of clarity, of transparency, of communication, but often it is merely a disguise, a mask for a hidden desire to be accepted, to be approved, to be validated. To explain is not always to inform. Many times, it is to beg for acceptance without even realizing it. Seneca, with his unshakable lucidity, said, "We should not live according to the opinions of others, but according to our own reason." And still, so many live trapped in a silent confusion, believing that by explaining, they are simply making themselves understood, when in truth, they are begging to be approved, recognized, accepted. The revelation is uncomfortable, but essential. To explain is not necessarily to communicate. Often, it is to beg. It is to bend, to expose oneself, to weaken, in the attempt to obtain from the other a validation that should come from within. To notice when explaining if you are truly informing or, in truth, seeking approval, is an act of courage, of honesty, of lucidity. Because upon realizing that you are justifying merely to be accepted, perhaps you will discover that you no longer need to explain, that you no longer need to bend, that you no longer need to carry that burden. Like the warrior who, upon lifting the shield, realizes that it is not to protect, but to be seen, and then chooses to lower it in silence. So too, those who perceive this trap choose something else. The maturity to not explain, to not beg, to not seek what they already no longer need. Because they already are enough. They already recognize themselves. They already are free. There is a silent but intense temptation to try to convince through words what can only be proven through experience. To use words, justifications, arguments, to try to legitimize what, in truth, is only legitimized by time, by experience, by silent but irrefutable action. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, the philosopher, knew this and taught, "Do not speak any more about how a good man should be one." Because while one speaks, justifies, explains, they are still trying to convince. But when one acts, there is no longer a need for words, because action speaks alone, because action transforms silently and definitively. The breaking of this illusion is this: explanation convinces, but action transforms. Words persuade, but deeds endure. Speech attempts, but the gesture is incontestable. Faced with the impulse to justify, there is a question that can liberate. Do my actions already say enough? And if they do, then silence is not only sufficient, but superior. Because those who live what they believe do not need to speak about what they believe. Like the sun that never explains its light, that never announces its rise, that never justifies its brilliance, but simply rises and illuminates silently. So too, those who understand the silent superiority of action let deeds speak, let gestures communicate, and simply move, illuminating, living, without needing to explain. There is a mistaken, yet widely spread idea that silence is contempt, is weakness, is escape. That those who remain silent are omitting, hiding, or withdrawing out of fear or indifference. But in truth, silence can be a choice. Ethical, compassionate, elevated, mature. Silence can be a superior form of respect. Epictetus, with the clarity of one who deeply understood the human soul, taught, "Do not explain too much. Those who want to understand will understand. Those who do not will not, no matter how much you explain." Because explaining beyond what is necessary is to violate the other with a narrative they may not be ready to embrace or comprehend. To leave in silence is often not contempt, but the greatest respect one can offer. It is to not impose justifications that will not change anything. It is to not attempt to force an understanding that will not come. It is to not burden the other with what they do not want or cannot hear. When one realizes that explaining will not change anything, there is a possible and powerful choice: to honor one's own silence as an expression of maturity, as a manifestation of respect, as a sign of someone who no longer needs to prove, to defend, or to convince, but simply to move on. Like the tree that sheds its leaves in autumn without announcing that winter is coming, it simply accepts the cycle and moves silently, fulfilling its nature. So too, those who understand the delicacy of silence depart without noise, without explanation. They simply move on, in peace and with dignity. To leave is often seen as disloyalty, as rupture, as abandonment, as if by not explaining, by not justifying, by not staying, one were committing an act of betrayal. But the true meaning of leaving is not to break. It is to honor, not to flee, but to respect, not to wound, but simply to move on to one's own destiny. The hidden fear is always the same: to disappoint, to hurt, to be seen as ungrateful, to leave without explanations, as if it were mandatory to carry not only one's own path, but also the expectations and judgments of others, as if it were necessary always to ease the guilt of those who leave with justifications that soften the pain or the incomprehension of the other. Seneca, with the firmness of one who chose his own reason as a guide, said, "Who follows their path should not fear the opinion of others," because leaving is not disloyalty. It is fidelity to oneself. It is recognizing that there are moments when the best one can do is simply to move on, without noise, without defense, without the need for approval. Upon feeling the impulse to justify a departure, there is a question that can bring clarity. Will this explanation change my decision or only ease my guilt? And most of the time, you will realize that it will not change anything, that the most wise, the most mature, the most respectful is simply to move on with lightness and with dignity, like the traveler who, upon reaching the crossroads, does not pause to justify their choice, but simply moves on their path. So too, Those who understand the courage to leave do not explain, do not beg, do not plead. They simply move on, in silence, honoring their own destiny, respecting their own path, and allowing themselves to be free. In the end, there is a greatness, silent, invisible, but unmistakable, in those who choose to leave without noise, not explaining, not justifying, not defending. It is an act of stoic respect, of maturity, of self-mastery. Not to despise the other, but to honor one's own inner silence. Epictetus remains an eternal symbol of this ideal. The man who did not justify his freedom, who did not ask permission to be who he was, who simply lived according to his silent, firm, unshakable reason. Marcus Aurelius reinforces this image with the serenity of one who, even in power, even before the world, did not waste energy trying to be understood. He governed with presence, with consistency, with dignity, and let his acts speak for themselves, without needing speeches, without needing defenses, without needing explanations. And so remains the silent invitation for you. The next time you feel the need to justify a choice, breathe, be silent, and ask with honesty, why do I need to explain? Would it not be wiser to simply move on? Like the star that disappears at dawn without announcing its departure, because it understands that its function is not to be noticed, but simply to illuminate for as long as necessary, and then to leave in silence. So too you can choose that invisible greatness that does not need to be proclaimed, because it simply is. If this message touched you, leave in the comments, "I choose to move in silence." And remember, move in silence and simply be. If this video strengthened you, like and subscribe. Thus, you help us to spread even more this philosophy of silent and profound transformation.